to be loved is the most powerful and wonderful feeling that we're capable of experiencing. You can debate it, and it has been. You can deny it, and it has been. But I believe it stands as the truth. Now, there is at times a departure between loving and trusting. I'm capable of loving and reserving trust. And that's a whole big subject. But it feels fabulous to be loved, have to feel that and know it, and it feels good to be trusted. Why am I going there? Well, admittedly, it's a fairly thin line of connection, but there is a definite connection in the where we are in 2 Timothy chapter 1. In verse 14, Paul writes to Timothy, guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Most of the teaching I've ever heard, and to a large degree, most of what I've ever taught about trust and faith is about our trust in God. And in counseling, a good bit of the work I do is guiding people to choose to trust other people. And in marriage counseling, one of the big mountains to cross is a offended spouse taking the risk to trust their offender, and the offending spouse to earn the trust of the offended spouse. Boy, that there's no ABC's magic formula. There's no pixie dust for that. It takes work, effort. And my role is to offer encouragement and help. I can't do that for anybody. And that's all very important stuff. Okay. Now, the thing, an aspect of trust that I don't ever remember getting taught about is the fact that God trusts us. Yeah, he does, really. Well, I mean, Paul connects the deposit, the good deposit, and we talked about that last time. I think although Paul doesn't totally identify what this good deposit is here, but we talked about two places in 2 Corinthians and then one place in Ephesians where Paul identifies that God's Spirit, him putting his Spirit in our hearts, this is a deposit guaranteeing things to come. I think it's reasonable to think that the good deposit that he's referencing here for Timothy to pay attention to and guard is that same deposit. Well, then he says, the good deposit that was entrusted to you. By whom? No man, human, can entrust you with the Holy Spirit. Now, I can pray that you will experience the power of the Holy Spirit, that your will give way to His will. But I can't entrust you with the Holy Spirit. Only God can entrust us with His Spirit. Let's ponder just a minute. God trusts us. Oh, and here's a big deal on that in my thinking. He trusts us in spite of the fact that He knows us completely. Here is a question. Different people are going to answer this question differently, but my question is, would you trust you? To what degree would you trust you? Could there be anything as precious? I don't believe there's anything more precious than this deposit, this guarantee that He has put in our hearts, His very Spirit. Would you trust you with that? Now, some days I'd say, well, I think I'm not perfect, but I think, And there are other days I think, wow, nope, I wouldn't. And I don't think that's necessarily out of a poor self-image. I think the reality is, if you just really want to go on absolutely on track record, our absolute record of performance, none of us deserve that kind of trust. And yet, don't get stuck there. Move on to the and yet, He has entrusted us with this good deposit not because of our trustworthiness. Then what motivates Him to trust us with this good deposit? It's His grace. Well, I could go a long, long time on this whole thing of trust and how God entrusts us, as He did Timothy, with this good deposit, and why He does is the two-word answer: His grace, and what that looks like in life, because it's a big, deep subject. I'm really going to try and discipline myself not to go too far into that, except there is this, and it applies to all kinds of trust with all people that we know, and every context of life where trust is given. And I can use one word to express what that is: risk. If there is no risk, there is no trust. Does that sound weird? If I'm going to trust you with something, even if my level of trust of you is very high because you've demonstrated your trustworthiness over a period of time, and I have confidence in you, there will always be an element of trust, an element of risk in trust. I mean, that's an important aspect of trust on a human level in every context. But think about this. For God to entrust this good deposit to us, he takes a risk. Now, admittedly, risk is very different from God's perspective than from ours. Part of the risk in me entrusting someone else or trusting them at all has to do with I don't already know the outcome, right? And so I have to trust them. God already knows the outcome. And here's the thing about that. He not only does he know when I act in a worthy way with regard to his trust, he also knows when I'm going to fail. He can't be surprised, I believe. And in spite of his already knowing my weaknesses and my failures, both past and future, he still trusts me. I believe the greatest risk that God ever took, and again, it's really hard to frame up risk well for God because of what theologians call his omniscience, and that word means all-knowing. Since he knows everything, the rules of risk are different for him than they are for us, but still, from our perspective as humans, God takes the risk, and I believe the biggest risk he ever took was giving us a free will, giving us freedom to choose what we will do and what we will not do. Now, there are some people who their understanding of interpretation of predestination eliminates free will. And because their sense is, their belief is, everything in your life has already been predetermined by God from eternity, so that you may think you have free will, but you really don't. You are only doing what God planned for you to do. Now, I don't go there. I can't do that. To me, number one, it seems it feels like to me that I'm applying a quality to God that he is absolutely that is inconsistent with who he is. And the quality would be dishonest manipulation. Okay, I can get, I've talked about this before. Here's the deal. God, when he created Adam and Eve, put within them this ability to choose. That is what free will is about. I have a will, and I can exercise my will. I can choose to discover and then live within God's design, or I can discover my own will, and I can choose to live by my own design. To quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? God has entrusted us with free will, and out of that free will, we, from 2 Timothy 1:14, we guard the good deposit that has been entrusted to us. So the challenge, in my opinion, is, first of all, notice God has entrusted you, and do, in partnership with him, guard what he's trusted you with. Be back to follow that up next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.